a gut blow again to the professional wrestling world, losing Mean Gene. Such a link to so many different eras, but obviously one of the best ever to hold that microphone and interview anybody in the business.
One a damn good guy to boot. I mean, there are a lot of good guys in the business, and then there are a lot of assholes in the business. Probably most people would say I'm one of them. But Gene Okerlund was one of the sweethearts in the business. He was a guy I don't know of anybody that I've ever heard say anything bad about Gene. But he was a guy that, first of all, he was the voice of professional wrestling for the tens of millions of people that grew up on the WWF, which, let's face it, has been the predominant company of the last quarter century. When you hear Gene Okerlund's voice, even people that didn't watch professional wrestling or sports entertainment, whatever you want to call that, knew Gene Okerlund. When you'd see him, we just saw him recently at a couple of the conventions. You could see the outpouring of love from the fans. I mean, it was an immediate response from the fans anytime they saw Gene. Gene had some serious health problems. Over the years, from his eyes to his kidney and livers. There was like a litany of things that went wrong, but he always bounced back. And every time I'd see him after, at some point after that, he'd look great and be the same Gene. Hey, Shane. Hey, franchise. How you doing? And, it just was always up on everything and really, honest to God, loved professional wrestling. And you could see that, like, when he was performing, when he was on camera, you could see Gene evoking and just really setting the mood, whether it was to be a serious mood, a light mood, a tongue-in-cheek comment, whatever. Gene made that show exponentially more entertaining to watch because of his voice, his professionalism, his persona. And, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, and this is no slam to any other announcers, but there will never be another Gene Okerlund. He really represented and personified everything that was good about professional wrestling in the 80s and 90s and moving forward, even with this podcast, irreplaceable. Gene Okerlund, truly irreplaceable to professional wrestling.
Do you recall the first time that you met Mean Gene?
I do. The first time I went there in 1990, it's an intimidating place to walk in. Anytime you walk into a new promotion, it's intimidating. But, going from where I had come from into the then WWF, and these were the guys that were the faces of professional wrestling at that time. So it was a very intimidating place, not least to mention that, you've got Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan's and Paul Orndorff's and Jake Roberts and, all these names that you grew up watching. It was a very intimidating place. Gene made it a point to come while, me, just a snot-nosed kid at the time, came into the dressing room, introduced himself, called me by name, welcomed me there, and said, if there's anything you need from me, let me know. And always went out of his way to, like, if there was something on the TV taping that night, he would come and, obviously having sat in the production meeting, he would know what that segment was going to be about. But he would ask me, and not just me, everybody, that this is how professional Gene was, that he would professionally come to you and say, is there anything I need to know for the segment? In other words, is there anything you're planning on doing in the segment, in the match, that is going to be implicatory to what the storyline is playing out, so that he could then plug it in his commentary. And the only other person I ever saw do that never had to do it was Joey Styles. And, Gene was, for me, in that first memory of him, he was one of the people that really made me feel comfortably at home in a place that was brand new to me there. And that was Gene. And let's face it, most people think of the wrestling business and the larger-than-life personas. Gene Okerlund was already a household name at that point. There was no need, There were no brownie points being gained by him coming and talking to me, who was a nobody at that point in the business. And yet it had nothing to do with the professional side. That was Gene Okerlund, the person, the man, that he wanted to come and make this kid feel comfortable, because I'm sure he thought down the road, if this kid can help us draw, if this kid can become a star in the company, he wanted to be one of the first people to make me feel comfortably at home there. And, those are the types of things that, sometimes get taken for granted by some people. But for somebody like me, I look back at those and remember those very specifically, because, like I said, that was not the norm. That was not something that was ever done to me at any point in my career at that point. And moving forward, again, he and Joey Styles are the only two people I could think of that had that level of professionalism and that personal attention to it, where Joey would come around and say, hey, that new move you did, you have a name for it? And if you didn't, he would, kick around a couple ideas and come back and say, hey, what if you called that this or that? Or, and he'd have input to it. Gene was the only other person that I had seen ever do that, or I should say the other way around. Joey was the only person other than Gene I'd ever seen do that.